another Strategoi video. Today I've got Nick with me here to do a tournament report for a tournament we played, I think, about a month ago, where it took us a while to finally get around to recording this recording. But Nick is back from both Italy and Scotland at this point, and we have stable internet, and we're as good to go as on this as we possibly could be. How are you doing, Nick?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. And yeah, sorry about the delay, everyone. We tried multiple times to record this, but it kept getting worse and worse throughout my travels. The Wi-Fi was just not having it. But we're here now. We're ready to talk about it.
Yeah, so let's take a look at what we're going to be discussing here. As always, in our summary slide here, we're going to be doing a tournament review, taking a look at our army lists, our matchups, and then concluding with some thoughts about what we might do in the future with said lists or, just what we felt about the tournament in general. So, as far as the tournament review is concerned, we're going to cover the rules pack itself, the meta that was there, and the experience that we had in general. So looking at the rules pack, this was a small tournament. It was in Mechelen, which is a smaller town just outside of Antwerp in Belgium, where Jonas lives. I think it's okay for him if we tell people he's in that city. I think we've already referenced it a few times, but anyway. Jonas didn't make it to this tournament, but we did hang out with him beforehand, and we actually have some great photos. And you know what? I was going to include some of those in here, and I totally forgot about it because we have been talking about doing this for a month now. But anyway, it was a relatively small tournament, a single dayer with 3 games, 3 hours each, 3 rounds minimum. I'm not even 100% sure if that 3 rounds minimum was in fact in place in the pack, because this is a slide we pulled over from the last time we talked about a tournament. But generally speaking, that's a good thing to do at tournaments anyway. I don't know. Do you remember that being in the battle pack or the is that what we call them? Battle packs? No.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
It was in there, and then they also had some stipulations on, what happens if you don't make it to round 3, but they're trying to really make sure that we kept moving along with it.
Okay.
There wasn't a big, death clock on the screen or anything, but it was in there.
Yeah, of your death clock on the screen. Of your 3 games, how many of them did you guys use chess clocks?
None, actually.
Okay.
I don't. Well, actually, no. I take that back. I think I probably used it with my 3rd game.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The other 2 didn't have a chess clock.
Sure, and I didn't either. Yeah, it was. I mean, I was playing with an elite Stormcast list, so it was easy to play in time for me at least. But obviously, I mean, we both played Nurgle at this tournament, so that's always an army I think of as like you might want to use a chess clock with because it's pretty slow, obviously.
Sure.
So missions, we had Turf War, which we were just discussing, is the long ways, half and half deployment with 2 objectives, no reserves, and all summons are kind of limited with what they can do on the turn they come in. And then Nidus Pass is the one with the teleports in the corner, and then the kind of angular deployment zones, if I'm not mistaken. And then Realmstone Cache is the one in the center that, as we all know, on Battle Round 3 blows up and goes in a unknown direction. So these all 3 of these make for interesting matchups, and not all armies are equally adept at handling these. I feel like that's more true in the current GHB than usual. That there's the battle plans themselves make a huge difference in how you play. Do you feel that way too, or am I just having selective memory here?
I definitely do. I started actually stressing the battle plans more than I do my opponents, just because some of them are just really hard for me to manage, especially when they have like these little mechanics, halfway through that the entire like layout changes. So those are definitely tough ones. And you were there the night before. I was stressing out about playing Turf War, and we'll talk about the game a little bit. But yeah, I find that's been more of a heartache than the actual lists that I go up against.
Oh my gosh, the night before. What were we doing the night before? I stayed at your spot, and then did we play a game that night?
No, the night before we met up with Jonas, and we
Oh, of
cruised the
course.
city a little bit.
Of
Yeah.
course. Oh, that's right, because my sister was still visiting. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
back on track now. So we had a normal VP difference system, a differential system here. I don't know if there was anything particularly novel about it, other than I think it wasn't included in the battle pack itself. I think it was they just said we will be using a differential system, but they didn't explain how exactly the points would be scored. You just handed in your final scores and they computed it. That
Yes.
yeah. So I don't know if that's better or worse. Obviously, for transparency, it's worse, but in a sense, it might be better in that you might not fine tune your list for that specific differential system, and it just makes it maybe a little more casual that way. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Uh, I think it was just the element of not knowing how I was going to score was the one thing that I was a little wary of. But at the end of the day, it didn't really change much.
Sure,
The game played out how it was going to play out.
sure. All right, so let's move on to the meta. Our player base, as per usual, especially in Belgium, was a mix of seasoned and new players, and it was a generally casual environment. It was a smaller tournament. It's a nice club. I mean, everyone there is super nice, but it's just a gaming store, the back room of a gaming store, really. Um, and it just everyone's in a good mood. Usually at these things and super friendly. Um, I have found that, at least for those that don't know, northern Belgium, Flanders, is Dutch speaking, and the southern half is the French speaking part, Wallonia. And I haven't played any games in Wallonia, but the Flemish players I've played against have every time, I think I've played 6 tournaments in Belgium in the past year, and they're always super nice, and it's never too cutthroat. I think, and even their Worlds team that trains for teams that'll be coming up in like May or so, that'll be here in the Netherlands. Their Worlds team is not represented by any Flemish players. It's only French speaking Wallonians. So um, my guess is that there is a strong divide between I wouldn't say competitiveness of the two groups necessarily, because there are strong players in the northern half, but I think how seriously it's taken might be, they might just be there to have more, first and foremost, a good time and play with their models, and then secondly, to be competitive, which is really honestly how I play the game too. As much as um, do a lot of playing and am technically, I guess, working with the Dutch Worlds team to help, train with them. At the end of the day, I would rather just have a good time. So I always find these Belgian tournaments super nice. And Ruff, the host, the TO, and his group of guys behind him, they're always super friendly and super hospitable. Do you have anything to add to that, Nick?
I mean, it's more of the same. But I mean, anytime I see one of these tournaments pop up, I auto smash the join, right? Because I wouldn't miss these. I really really have a good time every time I go down. Um, yeah, it's more of the same, right? The players are super friendly. There's a good mix of competitiveness in there and also good spirits. So yeah, I just always have a really good time. And like I said, I would never miss one if I can help it.
Right. Yeah. And also, Nick and I, unlike a lot of the people who are, born in Europe and have kind of, people tend to get bored of or take things for granted in their own home continent, let's say. Nick and I are Americans, and we like seeing the city and going out. And Nick and I was joking with you, I think last time, that you and I always come in the next morning with a disadvantage because we always went out drinking the night before and didn't get a lot of sleep. So,
Yes, that
um,
is a bad habit that I've gotten you on,
uh,
which I'm very proud of.
well, yeah. If it makes you feel any better, a training day I just had this past Sunday, where it was kind of a little mini teams tournament. I also came in with very little sleep and hungover from hanging out with our friend Mathieu. So anyway, it happens.
Couldn't be more proud of you.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. Nick sends me pictures of every old fashioned he drinks, and I find it a good tradition that we have going. So moving on to the armies, like I said, there was only 18 armies, but the fact that we can see 10 of those 18 in just the armies here listed here is saying something. I think 3 Stormcast armies, 3 Sylvaneth armies, 2 ogres, and 2 Nurgle armies. And that's a pretty, I guess, expected mix. I keep seeing ogres way more than I think I should be, not in only in Belgium but also here in the Netherlands. But Nurgle is normal, Sylvaneth super popular and a techie right now, and Stormcast never got unpopular, especially since third edition started up. Otherwise, we also had Lumineth, Khorne, Soulblight, Nyx, Fireslayers, Idoneth, Scave, and Beast of Chaos, I said Fireslayers,
Yeah.
your Flesh Eater Courts, and then we had
Don't
Fire.
worry, I was ready to correct you as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
Then I saw the other one that starts with an F and was like, oh, I got that wrong.
That's right. We're not all the same, okay?
Yeah. You're both naked armies that all look the same. You have
We're
dragons.
How dare you?
You should start painting yours orange, and then I'll do my Fire Slayers army in Flesh Eater style to look like zombies or
God,
something.
that'd be great.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, do you have anything else to add about the meta?
No, I think I'm always happy to dodge Stormcast for whatever reason. Yeah, it was fun. I would like to get the opportunity to play some of these lists. I forget the guy's name, but the guy that plays the Soulblight every time, I always want to go up against his list, and I never get paired with him. So
Yeah.
someday, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, that's David.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. I had a lovely game with him at the last tournament that we reported on. So yeah, very cool guy.
Hmm.
All right, let's move on to the experience. So overall experience, we had said it's friendly and somewhat casual vibe, and the reason somewhat casual is because especially this time, there were a few of the kind of training for serious Dutch stuff players that came over. Um, I would say of particular note would be Hank and Paul, and they always come ready to compete. There were also some technical builds and players here. Like I said, a lot of Sylvaneth is techie these days, and you're seeing people trying things out. Nick, you yourself are always tweaking your list to try to get it as fine tuned as possible, whereas I'm always swapping lists to just squeeze in as many experiences as possible, which is kind of the opposite. And then Hank is also like you. Hank is constantly switching things around, so in his own list, so that he can tweak it to get to a little closer to something he thinks works against everyone. And then we said this is also great for trying out new things. What are some of those new things that you think a tournament like this is good for your army? Like, what did you try out this time?
Well, so I tried out a different build. Like you said, I'm into tweaking, so I'm just playing around with different, mostly dragons and fire slayers after all. Just kidding, flesh eaters. But anyways, so I like to see what different things that I can do in combos, and it's more or less, if you've seen the last ones, the same list, but with subtle shifts and spells and what have you. But what really helped me out in this one is it showed me what could be better, what can I take out, what can I do without, perhaps, especially in a more magic heavy meta. Because the purple sun could just end my day in a second, so I got to be able to compensate for things like that. And so it helped me really refine. So I'm excited to try out. I've got some new tricks up my sleeve, hopefully, and we'll see where that goes.
Cool. Let's move on to personal experience. Nick, you went 2-1, and you felt like this was a good indicator of the meta and helped refine your list for future events, as you were just speaking on. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I just had a great time. Yeah, so it's hard to talk about personal experience because it ties in exactly when we talk about the actual matchups and such. But overall, yeah, it was a good solid introduction of the meta, and then setting me up for the future, hopefully.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I went 1-2. Had some really tough matchups for my list, which we'll talk about later. But fortunately, every single one of my games was against a super lovely person. If if I play a tournament and do a tournament report, and I don't end up saying that, it probably means there was at least one person in there where I wasn't super vibing with. But this time, I really mean it for sure. I always mean it, but it's definitely true here. And to me, that's more important than having a just blowout, win everything kind of thing. But of course, I would have liked to have had some matchups that were a little bit more favorable for me. All right, let's move on. So, army list time. Nick, this is your feeding time too. Is that really the name you gave it?
I don't know. It's fitting though, because it's the second time I've used this list, but slightly different. So I guess I'll just keep a number added to it.
Yeah, so let me see if I can kind of, because I've played against you so many times, let me see if I can kind of walk people through the little bit of things that I can see on here, and then, and you can fill in all of my ignorance. So, obviously, Nick's running a three dragon list here. Depends on what you call a dragon and whether a terror guy counts as a dragon or not, but a three big guy list. And then he's also got yet two more heroes going on, and then what appears to be just 30 Crip Ghouls. But in reality, you have some amount of summons. How many summons do you have in this list this time, Nick? Is this your most
Uh,
summoning army, or is it not quite as big as some of the others?
yeah, this is the most. So I got 5 different summons going on here.
Okay. Which is so one for each hero. And what could you choose to bring in? What's the flexibility on this?
Yeah, so for the Terrorgeist, they can bring in a unit of Knights, so that's either your Flayers or the Crypt Fiends. I think that's what they're called. And then the Zombie Dragon can bring in a Courtier. So you have your Vargulfs, you've got the Flayer one. I forget the name of it. Sorry, I'm a bad Flesh Eater player. And then you have your Cryptghast. And then for the Ghoul King, he could bring in 10 ghouls, and the Archregent can do pretty much anything he wants. So Knights, Courtier, or Serf, so your ghouls as well. If he picks the Serfs or the ghouls, that's a block of 20.
Okay.
Got some options there.
Gotcha. And basically, what Nick tends to do with this, obviously, you took an additional mount trait to make one of the. I guess you've got two mount traits there, so I don't know which one you normally would take as the default. Like between the two mount traits we see here, which one is the one that you take no matter what, and which one would you think of as the okay? I needed the extra mount trait for this one.
Yeah, so the gruesome bite is the one that you always got to take. That's the re-roll failed hit rolls on the fanged maw. So when you're fishing for those automatic 6 mortal wounds, um, that one is always a must. The other mount trait, could do without. And in my future list, talk about tweaking, I do without it. So um, just wanted to see the impact on this because this is actually the first time that I've played with a zombie dragon in a tournament. So I wanted to see what I could do with that.
Right. So your command entourage is going to be consisting of the two smaller heroes, the ones on foot, plus the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist 2. That's not your general. And then the battle regiment is everything else except for because you can only take one behemoth per battle regiment, one behemoth hero, big hero like that. I guess technically it's 10 wounds or more. It doesn't have to be in a behemoth. You had to get a 5 drop here. How often were you outdropped in your games? Do you remember?
I believe 2 out of 3. If I'm not mistaken, I think I beat the Maggotkin by 1 drop.
Okay, and
If I,
how important is that for your list that you get to choose priority?
it's not really. I go off of the assumption that I'm not gonna get to pick, so I always just deploy defensively, and that's kind of how I've set it up. I believe you call me a what is it, a corner hog or whatever. Yeah. So
No,
I
yeah,
usually will just create a very defensive dragon bubble for screening because I assume they're always going to give me the turn, and even if I get it, odds are I'm going to give them the turn anyways.
I'm pretty sure it's corner whore, but
That's the one, yes.
yeah, corner whore. I mean, it rolls off the tongue. It's so lovely.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't do that if you like your Crip Ghouls are obviously not going. They're not the ones that are like making the most ground coverage here in your games, right? They're more just there as like objective holders. You keep them back or whatever, and you fly over them with the big guys, and then summon some other guys to the side of the board, right? Your Crip Ghouls, what do they usually do?
Well, it depends. So on the battle plan, so I can use them, and when we get into the games, I can tell you how I actually use them effectively. But they're really cheap screens, so that's the first part. But then also they're surprisingly dangerous. So in not this tournament, but a different one, I dropped an incarnate with ghouls. So it's if you buff them correctly and use them to what they can actually do, people tend to underestimate them and not worry about them, and they can really do a lot of damage. But they're also great for just snagging objectives and dying and coming back to life. So, with Flesh Eater Courts, it's really easy to bring your units back. So, pairing them with the summons can actually be a really effective combo.
Right. How many attacks does each Crip Ghoul have?
They have 2. And then the fun part is if you need weight of dice, you can use the Archregent's War Scroll spell to potentially give them D3 more. And the Ghoul King has a similar spell that adds 1. So you could essentially get a unit of 10 attacking 6 times.
So, the wording on the D3 more, is it you roll a D3 for each model? So it can vary?
Or for the unit.
Okay, so that's really swingy then.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah. Okay.
So worst case scenario, you could get 4, and a best case scenario, you could get 2. If you combine the 2 War Scroll spells that I was talking about.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then as the name implies, with our battle trait, we use Feeding Frenzy. So potentially you could make them fight twice, which is 60 attacks basic, and then 60 more attacks. So you're hitting on 4s and 4s.
Yeah.
120 dice, odds are you're going to get something in there.
Yeah, and that's just a command ability, right?
Yes, it's a command ability, but for my list, choosing it as my sub-faction, I get to do it for free once per turn.
Right.
So I'm not spending command points to be able to do it.
Okay. And so for anyone that's keeping track of the stuff, the stats at the bottom here, the points, of course, are accurate, I think, assuming that we got it properly calculated here. But the wounds, bodies, and models is misleading because you're going to be summoning so much stuff. Like, how many points worth of summons do you usually bring in?
It's almost 1,000 points. It's pretty close.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's playing another list that pulls in about 1,000 points every game, I thumbs up this idea now. Anyway, all right. Is there anything else you want to add about this, or should we just talk about it in the context of the games?
No, I'll just talk a little bit about the one of the tweaks. So, I was never a fan of the zombie dragon. Everyone, Fang Maw, that's the way to go. The problem with Fang Maw that I have, especially if you don't have the mount trait, is that it's super swingy and it's only 3 attacks. And if you didn't get that 6, you're hitting on 4s. So it makes it quite difficult. So I actually like the Zombie Dragon's fight profile because it has a little bit more consistency because there's more basic attacks. But also the main draw for this thing is its War Scroll spell, which is with anything wholly within 16 inches gets to re-roll its wounds, which is huge, especially when we kind of go back to that concept of using these little tiny ghouls that don't do much. Yeah. They're hitting on 4s and 4s, but if they're within range of any of the heroes, because they're all, except for the Ghoul King, they get to re-roll 1s to hit. And then with this spell, they're re-rolling their wounds. So that 120 attacks, re-rolling 1s, and then re-rolling all wounds is pretty deadly. So that was kind of the combo that I wanted to try out and see how this really works, and it played a huge impact in my games, quite a bit.
And when you say re-rolling wounds, you mean failed wound rolls on a 4-up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just for anyone keeping track, that means it boosts up from obviously a 50% to a 75%. So it got a whole 20 or 50% boost there in efficiency. So. That does make a difference, especially with weighted dice. So, pretty cool.
Yeah. So that was the new gimmicks for this list.
And did it play out the way you wanted it to? Will you keep it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'll keep it for sure. So my future list is going to always have a zombie dragon because that spell is just so helpful. I think one of the other tweaks that I'll probably do is switch over some spells around to actually give him flaming weapon, because then I can allocate it to his bigger attack, which already does damage 2, can make that damage 3, 7 attacks. It's a pretty chunky amount, especially if I couple the Archregent and the Ghoul King spells on there. So if I, best case scenario, make that 11 attacks because I added 4.
Sure.
Got a lot of potential for some high output.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to my list here. Really quickly, it's a simple Stormcast list. That's the nice thing about Stormcast is they're all easy. I brought it in a tiny little box because I was visiting. My sister was visiting with her family, and we were in Brussels the day before, so I wanted to ride with something smaller on the train. Like tip is as is typical in Stormcast. Hammers in Scions of the Storm was my sub faction. That gives me the 6-up ward around objectives, and of course Deep Strike if I want to do that. Um, and then it's built around so many of the normal things we come to expect. Lord Relictor General with Translocation, Mirror Shield for not being able to be shot outside of 9 inches, High Priest for the rerolls, and he's already got +1 to chant or pray. So you're getting that translocation off 35 out of 36 times on a 2+ rerolling. Um, and that's mostly used for the long strikes, but could also be used for anyone for objective control or whatever if you need to throw someone over to another part of the board. But this list has the long strikes in it, and if you're keeping up with the changes they make in the quarterly battle scrolls updates, long strikes can no longer, a unit that's reinforced can no longer use the Thunderbolt volley, a holy command. So I did the math on this. It turns out that it's basically the same if you account for the fact that you can only use all-out attack on one of the two units if you split them. And so I've just been saying, let's take a big block of 6 so they can all teleport together, and they're less likely to be totally wiped off the board before I can rally them or something. But what this list was really based around was a big block of Annihilators with Grand Hammers, who, if you don't know, drop down and do some mortal wounds when they come down. And if you have a Lord Imperator in your list, like I do here, you're dropping down within 7 inches instead of 9, and they have reroll charges on that turn they come in, which means they're pretty much guaranteed. I think it mathematically comes out to about the same as rolling a 2-up on a d6. And of course, if you have Bloodthirsty, you could use that for later, but that first turn you don't need it. The Annihilators can basically wipe out anything they want, except they're not very fast once they land. So it turns out I probably should have taken 2 units of 3. I never once got to use the Holy Command I brought, the Unleash Thy Hatred, which I think gives the Annihilators once per game +1 attack on their profile, which just makes them even more killy. It would have been better to split it so they could land at 2 different places and attack 2 different fronts, I think. But I also brought 2 Concussor units, which are better once they get into combat over Fulminators and are a little bit cheaper. And then 2 units of 5 Vindictors, and I've basically got all the normal battalions that you would expect here. So it's elite and can do really well at putting out a lot of damage with the Annihilators and Raptors long strikes combined, and the Concussors really. But like I said, I had some bad matchups. Nick, do you have any questions about this before we move on, or do you feel like it's pretty straightforward?
Did we play a practice match before this?
I
'Cause I
don't.
remember.
I don't
Yeah.
think we did because I was too busy with my sister visiting. So
Yeah. Well, maybe not getting too much to the matchups, but in general, how do you feel? Were the long strikes worth it in the big 6 block, or?
if I had to split either the long strikes or the Annihilators, I would split the Annihilators
Okay.
because they need to get up close and personal, and they can both drop, and they do mortal wounds and they drop. And a unit of 3 can delete a lot of things. You don't need the full 6 to do the deleting. So yeah, I think in general I would have if I had to choose, but to me, taking a 3 of long strikes now became okay because if you're going to take Thunderbolt Volley, which honestly I would have used more, I would have used in every one of these games because I never got to use my Holy Command of Unleash Thy Hatred for the Annihilators. So it probably would have been better to take 2 units of 3 and take that other command. So maybe I would have split both of them. I don't know how that would have impacted my. That would have meant that I couldn't take the concussors. One of the concussor units couldn't go in bounty hunters if I wanted to put both annihilators in there. So that was probably another thing I was thinking about. But yeah. All right, let's move on to the matchups. So I guess I'll go first since I've got my stuff listed here. But normally I would have put Nick first. But it is what it is. So we both played against the same Maggotkin list, which was this lovely guy. I believe his name was Nicholas. Lovely guy. I don't think he's played a whole lot. This might have even been his first tournament, but yeah. Super sweet, and he wasn't playing particularly cutthroat at all. He's playing a great Nurgle list. It was a combo of flies and Blight Kings. I can't remember. I think he might have had Bloab Rotspawn in there, but and maybe also I think it was a great unclean one. Was that right?
Yes, he did have a big one in there.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Nurgle is just such a nothing against anyone that plays Nurgle, but I feel like Nurgle is a great first army to bring to a tournament because as long as you can play it fast enough, because Nurgle kind of plays itself a little bit. Again, I'm not trying to crap on anyone that plays Nurgle, but I feel like in the rock paper scissors of Warhammer of Age of Sigmar right now, Nurgle doesn't have a whole lot of easy answers, um, and it just kind of does what it wants to do, and as long as you know what to expect out of your opponent, I think Nurgle ends up playing a little bit friendlier to people. It's not a skew list per se, a skew army. It we know the one thing it does, but the one thing it does, being tanky and giving out mortal wounds throughout a long game, um, it's kind of on auto. So I don't know. Do you feel like that's a fair assessment of Nurgle, or am I being too salty about it?
I don't know if that's salty per se, but I would say that I mean, personally, I don't enjoy that book. It's well written and everything, but it's just not my style. And so I'm never terribly excited to go up against Nurgle in general because, yeah, it is what it is, and there's just no creative way around it. I mean, you could beat it, obviously. That's not what I'm saying, but it's just, yeah,
Yeah,
it's always kind of a bummer for me when I have to play Nurgle.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just a lot of wounds to lift, and they're
Mhm.
so good against mortal wounds. There isn't really. I don't know what the right answer for them really is. I have beaten them. Don't get me wrong, but they're usually in super swingy games where I manage to spike at some point and just take out their key pieces really early on, and then they were too slow to do anything about it after that. But if it's a normal game where I don't spike in any particularly strong way, I usually lose to Nurgle. Also, this was the worst potential battle plan for me because it's the no deep strike one, which is what my whole list was kind of built around with the Annihilators. And when those Annihilators finally did hit his big block of Putrid Blight Kings, I only removed half of them, which, again, they're tanky as hell. So, um, and two objectives is tough against Nurgle as well. So this was just not a great battle plan for me to go up against. Why don't we talk about your since we're talking about the same list? Why don't we talk about your Nurgle game that you played in the middle, which was on
Yeah,
the teleports one, the Nidus Path.
yeah. So it was we never used the Nidus Path, so we can already park that part of it. Never came into play. Um, it was a very aggressive start, so I think I can't remember if he gave me the turn or not. I don't think he did. I think he might have taken first turn, but he was in my face pretty quickly with his flies, and I think he didn't quite grasp the potential of a Terrorgeist, especially a buffed Terrorgeist. Um, so after he charged in, I was able to, like you said, remove some of those key pieces pretty quickly with Feeding Frenzy. So I deleted one and then came back in and deleted another unit. So that was already putting him on the back foot. And then it just became, managing the disease and overall just controlling more of the board, some more board dominance. I summoned to shut down his trees, just to soak up those damages. And because I was able to summon around the board, I was able to really have higher mobility and control of the board, taking objectives, taking territories. So scoring battle tactics was more in my favor in this one, mostly because one of the things that you commonly see with Nurgle is they just rush you and box you in, so you can't leave. But that I punched a hole through the side already, and I have summons, so it didn't really work out that way. I think I actually did get rid of the entire unit of Blight Kings. Um, it took me a couple rounds, but I got him eventually. And overall, the game ended with just the big boy left in the
Oh,
game.
okay.
Yeah. And we had already done the math. We knew the game was over, so he just piled in. We just went for broke to see what he could kill, maybe score another battle tactic. But it was a very, very fun game. He was a great guy to play against. It was pretty intense, honestly. It was really long. It wasn't mine to begin with. I just had a lucky start, I think,
Yeah.
especially when it came to the mortal wound output from the Fanged Maw. Um, yeah, it was a great game, but ultimately I came out on top on that one.
Yeah. And yeah, again, nothing against whatever Nurgle. I think eventually we're going to see some armies that have better answers to Nurgle that can consistently kind of rock, paper, scissors their way through them. But I think because I tend to take low body count armies most of the time, I just have it's just not a good matchup for me. Soul Blight also isn't if they're taking hordes. So
Yeah.
that could just be my personal experience. But this Nicholas was a lovely player and a sweet
Oh
guy.
yeah,
Definitely
really
looking
good
forward to
time.
playing him again. My
And I maybe I don't buy it. He's too good of a player to just be coming in. So
Yeah,
he's got a great tournament career ahead of him, I think.
yeah, yeah. So my second game, I was pleasantly very surprised to play against my good friend Hank, who's just had his second baby come along. So he might be out of the tournament scene for a minute, but shout out to Hank. I was so excited to play when we got announced we were playing against each other that I gave him a big hug. Um, and we had a lovely game. It was the best game of the tournament in terms of how close it was, how intriguing it was. I play him all the time against his Ideneth. I think I've only beaten him once out of maybe 7, 8 games, and he is just really good with his Ideneth. He's popped a Kronspine in there, has a lot of missile attacks with his Sharks. But the fun thing about this game was, so we're playing the Nidus Pass. I don't think either one of us used it. He didn't. He never needs it because he's so fast, and I had a teleport anyway. Um, but he ended up um, maybe not realizing how much work the annihilators could do. So I think it was like within the first turn, half of his army was gone, which was really fun for me because it looked like I was actually in a really good place to win. But again, we play an objective game, not one of killing as many models as possible. So it ended up turning into ultimately, he could just get around the board better. And killing all the sharks, I know it's just a 4-up save, but in 8 wounds per shark. But killing every one of those sharks is difficult, especially considering they can hold their own in melee just fine, as opposed to a lot of powerful artillery platform type things. My long strikes also, this is kind of a bad matchup for me, always is against Ideneth because I can't choose what I want to shoot. That said, the
Yep.
Annihilators, well, what happened, I guess, was that I was able to take out enough of the screens with the long strikes, and then the Annihilators got to hit something more meaningful, which was nice. But anyway, Hank's a fantastic player, and we have a great time playing against each other. So it was like one of the best games I've played in a while. So no complaints there. Have you ever played Hank?
I have not played against Hank
But you
yet.
guys did take like what, like first and second place, second and third, first and second place at the Bugman's tournament, I think.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
got first, I think second on
yeah.
that
A
one.
lot of times when that happens, you don't end up playing each other because if there's enough players there, that just doesn't work out that way mathematically because you both
Yep.
had to go 3-0 or whatever. Well, while we're on the topic, why don't you talk about your first game? So we're just swapping places here. So this is you talking
Okay.
about the turf war again, the no reserves or whatever.
Yeah, so this one I played against Lumineth, which was like your techless endless spells build. So this one I was really scratching my head around during our entire evening hangout session of like how to play this. So we were going back and forth about, do I range the sentinels because there was a good big chunky block of sentinels? Do I try and range the spells, or do I just alpha at the strike? I think I may have had more drops. Or I might have had the choice. I can't really recall. But either way, that was the big question. And I think we ended our evening saying, okay, we're going to alpha strike him. That's the move. And then when we started the game, I didn't do that. I actually backpedaled quite a bit, took it to the back end of the board to range the sentinels, and this is where I used those ghouls to just tow on objectives and summon onto things as well. So I bought my time, and the other thing was is he actually didn't advance too far either. So he really relied heavily on his endless spells to get him out there and get in my face. But this cost him with battle tactics in the end. So overall, We didn't get into combat, I think, until turn 4, something like that.
Yeah.
It was just ranging and scoring as best I could, of trying to avoid the purple sun. I think his MVP in spells was the Jaws. Like that thing was just really crushing my units pretty quickly. Um, but overall, yeah, it was a. We played, I think, to the last couple of minutes. It was a long, long game of just waiting it out and just hoping those rules weren't what they needed to be for the Sentinels. And then ultimately, yeah, it was very close. But again, came out on top on that one.
So I think
This is yeah.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is one of the ones where I said it really helped me to test this list against the meta because I was getting shut down constantly with spells to the point where, again, I had to pull back and range wizards, and trying to unbind a purple sun is never easy, but it's also not the most threatening thing at the moment. Trying to get away from the jaws. So yeah, it was a lot of picking and choosing on how to do this. I know one fun instance was there was like a make or break moment with his jaws, and he ended up rolling a 1, and it didn't work, and that was just such a breath of fresh air.
Right.
As long as that's not from the sun, I'm okay.
Did
yeah, it was a lot of fun moments like that. This was actually the second time I've played this guy before, and he played Lumineth again in the last time. But this was a really, really staunch difference from when we played before. This list was tough. It was a lot of fun to play against, and see how my list would hold up against it.
Yeah, this is Stephen. So
Yeah.
you guys actually played. Was it the last game at the previous tournament in Belgium? The previous non-doubles tournament. I think was it your last matchup that day, or was it your first one? I can't remember.
I believe it was my first one.
Okay, yeah, and this is like the rematch. We thought maybe he's coming with. It was much closer this time, right?
Yes, last time it was. I had a series of very, very lucky rolls, which ended the game pretty quickly. Getting the double turns and things like that. But this one was far from that. This really, really challenged my list to the max.
Sure. Do you So speaking of the Jaws, Ravenous Gnashing Jaws, do you for those that don't know, it's an anti. It does mortal wounds based on the difference between what he rolls and your movement characteristic. So I'm assuming when you say it was doing a lot of damage, it wasn't doing that damage against your like big guys. It was doing damage against your ground dudes, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So is there any part of you that thinks taking like a Vargulf, is that what the Flesh Eater version of the Vargeist is, the Vargeist kit? Any temptation to take a Vargulf list to avoid something like that?
So I think you mean the flares, right?
Yeah, whatever they're called. Yeah.
The Wicked things. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Honestly, just because the flares aren't good enough to last on their own. I mean, there's some builds with it, but for me personally, they just kind of die, and they don't really have as much output as you would with other things that would compensate it. Like you're missing out on endless, because the ghouls will be there regardless, unless you do you choose the sub faction Blister Skin to get them, or you have your courtier as a general. That's the only way to get them as a battle line.
Yeah.
And so playing around with that, I mean, it would be fun to try it, but I don't know how competitive it would be. So at this point, I wouldn't consider it, just because I spend all my points on the dragons themselves,
right,
and really just managing them.
What's their movement characteristic? 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, so fast enough to avoid Jaws, but honestly, I've only gone up against Jaws once. So, and that's actually in the next game I'll be talking about. But and the other thing too is if you make them battle line, they become GVs because they're 4 wounds and they don't have mounts.
Yeah.
So then they're just sitting ducks for dying.
Yeah. There's that, and then the problem that I have with the Jaws was that it was chewing away at my ability to hold the centers, right? So it was crunching away my chaff, which is what it's supposed to do. But because I said I had to range everything with my dragons, I wasn't in a counter position. So if he moved up, I couldn't get there for at least another turn.
Yeah.
So it was really essential keeping those things alive.
All right, last question about this. You might have mentioned it, but I forgot, or didn't catch it. But did he use Total Eclipse on you, and how much of an impact did that make on your command abilities? Because your command abilities are a big part of your army.
Yes, so he did use Total Eclipse, and it is a problem, but it's not devastating because I am in the sub-faction Feast Day. Feast Day it's a command point, and that's what it lets me fight twice, but I can do that without spending a command point. So that's ultimately what I'm spending my command points more regularly on, especially when I can't use it with all out attack. So on average, I usually just have a dragon in combat, and then the other one's in position for a counter. So I'm really not spending too many command points. If you don't have that sub faction, you're gonna have a problem with that. So it really comes down to battle shock with that one, or all at defense, and that's where it kind of became a pain in the ass, like trying to keep it up with sentinels raining down on you.
Right.
But it wasn't the worst thing in the world. I've played a lot against Lumineth, so when I first started, that became a real problem, and I didn't know how to manage it. But now it's pretty okay. It doesn't ruin my day as much.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Um, all right. So my last game was against the man himself, Ruff, who is the TO for these events. And he was taking, I think, what he too would probably describe as a more casual fun list. It was a Maw Tribes uh, Man Eaters, not Beast Claw Raiders list. And he actually brought a whole bunch of magic. He had the guys standing around the pot. I think he had something like 4 or 5 casts in the army, like leaning into the magic, which isn't particularly an ogre thing, but he was getting some pluses, I think. And he brought jaws and I can't remember what other, maybe swords. I think he brought, yeah, quicksilver swords. Um, and it did some work on my list, but at the end of the day, it was a bad matchup for him. We were playing Realmstone Cash, which it didn't even make a difference. I had shot off so much stuff and annihilatored off so much stuff by the like end of turn 2 that honestly I felt bad. This was one of the swingier games I've had in a long time where he didn't get to do much, and that's just not a fun game for anyone. Like even though I lost the IDK game and the Nurgle game, I I think it's just better. You're spending 3 something hours. We called it early. I actually had like an hour and 40 minutes when we were done to just hang out with Nick because you finished early too, right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
So
Not in a good way.
yeah, ours were opposite. But and sometimes this happens for those that don't play at tournaments too often. The first round, of course, is random. And the second round is going to be what's going to determine, of course, how much of an uphill battle you've got going for your last game, especially. So, of course, technically your first game does too, but you can also submarine, as we say, where you can start up high, go low, and then come back up and still have a good record. That's sometimes a winning strategy because if you win everything, then you might get placed against the absolute toughest matchups. Um, and Nick, I would say in our tournament experiences in general, you tend to play against a lot more competitive guys because you end up doing better early on and then end up having to play a lot of the same people over and over again. Maybe not in Belgium per se, but um, and just in general. And you end up having uh, maybe not necessarily quality of game, but definitely games that are more like down to the wire or like are frustrating because you just end up having more competitive type stuff regardless of who the player is. I don't have that experience as often because I'm always often taking techie swingy lists, not necessarily lists that can't win, but lists that whatever for whatever reason I don't end up doing as well. I also think I'm a worse general than you are. But at the end of the
I don't
day, at the end, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I end up I think having a more kind of fun time at tournaments sometimes. Um, that's not always true, but I think I end up getting these matchups. The problem is I had the opposite thing happen in this last game, where it was a kind of a crush situation, and it's just that's not fun for anyone. The last game of the day, you want it to be a fun. And Ruff and I have a great time hanging out, but and he was a super, big sweetheart about everything. But like at the end of the day, I don't think it was his favorite game of the day either. So that's kind of how my tournament turned out, with some tough matchups for the beginning, and then like the opposite for the last one, where it just it was a great day, but it wasn't exactly my best set of games, I guess. What about you? Let's talk about the Sylvaneth game.
So this is another one where it was I learned a lot from the game of how to approach a certain situation. So, as we mentioned, the battle plan Realmstone, which starts out as a singular objective in the game, and my list I was going up against a Gotrek, So Gotrek, Gotrek, whatever. Drika and Drycha. Man, so many ways to pronounce this army. And the Warsong Revenant. So already uphill battle with against the spells, and I have to really rely on my ward saves as much as possible. And I've never gone up against Gotrek with this list, so I was a bit scratching my head on what's the best way to handle it. And kind of to your point, Ryan, I've played against Paul. I think every single time now when we go. So this is like our back and forth rivalry we've got going on. So again, I've mentioned it every time I play that Paul forces me to be a better player because Paul is a very very good player. So in this one, he even mentioned he's like I brought Gotrek for this battle plan, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. There's not much I could do to move him off that center. Uh, and so the game went about as you would expect. Lots of mortal wounds coming in my way from the Warsong Revenant. Dryga was doing great with her shots. So just taking me down over and over. And I think I overshot it. I got a little too excited of trying to just get in there, get stuck in. The Iron Jaws in me came out, and I threw a dragon at Gotrek just to see how that would work. And the easy answer is it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so that didn't go very well, and then it just kind of continued to fall apart from there. And so it was a very quick game. I think we pretty much knew by the end of 2 that it was over, and then I think we shook hands by 3. So it was a really fast game. But what I will say is, I don't think I'm breaking any secrets here, but the answer to Gotrek is weight of dice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think creatively is if I had thrown ghouls at him, we would have had a different story. So 120 dice, remember, if you can recall from a couple minutes ago, team. Yep. 120 dice, re-rolling ones, re-rolling wounds. Potentially, I need to get 8 of those through. So, Mr. Mathhammer, I expect to see in the next video, would that have worked? Would Nick have killed Gotrek? On odds alone.
So let's talk about why we're talking. So because it's easy to forget for us that play in tournaments and know these units so well that some people listening don't know every unit in the game. And Gotrek's not even in a battle tome. So just the quick answer here: he only has a 4-up save and 8 wounds, but he has a 3-up ward save. And most importantly, he turns all damage of any source, whether it be a magic ability or whatever, to, if it's higher than 1, to 1. And if it would slay him, it just does, I think, 1 wound. So Gotrek is extremely hard to kill. Plus, he can fight twice and can do a shit ton of mortal wounds, and has rerolls on everything. So he's a nightmare. But yes, the reason why we're saying weighted dice kills Gotrek is because with such a good save and ward save, and remember, if you Finest Hour and All Out defends him, then we're talking about a 3-up save ignoring 1s, Ren 1, and a 3-up ward. And so the thing with Gotrek is you just need to keep trying. You just need to have, eventually, something is going to get through. And you want it to be, in order to get the max amount of attacks, you want a lot of attacks, you need to probably have a unit that has lots of attacks but doesn't have a lot of damage. That's usually a trade-off we see in the game. Sometimes we just multiply the two together and say it's the same thing, but in this case it's not. You want really high attacks to sneak through there, and eventually he'll roll some 1s, or 2s. That's how you kill him. I do think, especially if they could fight twice, you're looking at a really good chance of killing Gotrek. That would be a fun video to do. Here's the other thing, though, is if he fights first. Now, on your turn, obviously you could choose to fight first with that unit. But if he fights first, then he's probably going to kill that whole unit. So
right.
That's the other real answer there. But
I also think, at that point, again, the strategy or the move there is that they're ghouls. Who cares if he kills them all? And then hopefully I have another unit to throw right back at him. So another 120 dice. So again, I think it's about timing and just, again, weight of dice to bring him down, because, a dragon's just not going to do it. It had a bunch of attacks, but they aren't as, it's higher damage, but, I was curious to see what it would do. It was more curiosity killed my dragons. And then, So from there, that's something I would probably try in the future, but it was a good learning experience to never do that again.
Yeah, I got you.
But overall, yeah, good game, short game because of that, but it was still fun and I learned a lot.
Cool. So short games all around last game. And that's okay. Sometimes at tournaments you're done and it's just you get time to hang out with your buddy. So that's
Oh
exactly
yeah,
that's exactly what we did. I think we had a number of beers that day for sure. But
yes,
oh, because we were hanging out with Hank at the bar across the street too.
yes, we
Yeah, it was
were.
a good day. So wrapping up here, Nick, do you remember how well you placed?
I want to say seventh, maybe something.
That sounds. You might have had fifth actually, but
I don't
or
recall. I
maybe that would.
remember when we were guessing, I said it would be upper mid tier, and I think it landed exactly somewhere around there.
I would switch over to the tournament results page, but it's from the tabletop, whatever the website's called. But it will show that on the screen right now, and I don't have it pulled up. But I do think it was either five or seven. It was one or the other. You did well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and let me look. I think I tied with Staven for 10, it was like 10.5. I think we both basically got 11, which means that one of us would have been 10, one of us would have been 11. I'm pretty sure
sure.
that's right. So I was, it's because I didn't give up too many points on. I don't know if I gave up a lot of points in the Nurgle game, but against Hank, I think it was relatively not that bad. Um, so, that's the other thing. Keep in mind that your one score at a tournament, in terms of binary win loss or maybe tie, doesn't necessarily calculate with a differential system into, oh, well, I was in the top three tables, or I was in the top three or bottom three tables, or, whatever I mean, rankings. So you might be surprised at the end and how you end up doing at a tournament if you actually manage to avoid giving up too many points, which is just another side of playing smart and strategically in your games. Um,
Yes, I have it pulled up, Ryan. Actually, I
oh,
am seventh, and you took 12th.
oh, they changed that then. Sometimes I've
But you,
seen that happen at some of these tournaments where because I remembered what they said and it was I'll double check it here too. But what was this one called? This was
big
Chamber
war.
of War. Oh, you're right. Okay, so he took 12 too. So it was 11.5. I was just off by one.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember that when we played the doubles tournament, our ranking changed.
Yes,
But
I do remember
but
that.
that's
Yeah.
okay. That's okay. I think it went from being 5 to 6 or something like that. But it's fine. It's all good. Maybe something got corrected when they recalculated everything over at the end. So future goals for your list. Do you have anything you want to quickly go through here?
Well, so the quick tweaks I can mention, like I said, I moved some spells around again, and I'm actually I sold my soul to Games Workshop and I bought myself an incarnate. Um, so I'm going to see how that fits in, if that's better or worse. And I'll be taking this to the next tournaments, I imagine, and we'll see how it goes. So you'll be hearing about it. But overall, just some minor tweaks, nothing too dramatic.
And the Kronspine replaces one of the dragons. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It replaced one of the Terror guys, so I'll have a Terror guys, a Zombie Dragon, and a Chrome Spine.
Gotcha. That seems cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I thought so.
I'm not gonna take this list anywhere anytime soon. But like I said, I'd probably split up the Annihilators and Long Strikes. That said, I am playing with, as everyone is aware of me, the Table Talk, and then another video that'll be coming out soon. I've been playing with Zinch exclusively lately. But I did play a really fun all flying Stormcast list that I call Ryan Air. That was Lord Celestant on Star Drake. The Aventus Firestrike because I was actually in Hammers of Sigmar, but Aventus Firestrike on the Toralon. Um, 3 units of 2 dragons and a unit of prosecutors and a life. I think there was a life swarm in there too. And it's super fun. What can I say? I'm back to dragons when I play Stormcast, and I like using the big guys and going all elite. So I probably do think that'll be my next set of Stormcast games. Will be with that once I come back to it. Closing thoughts, Nick. You got anything else coming up?
I've got a doubles tournament coming up, playing with one of my buddies. I think he's going to do Slanesh, so we'll see how that works and what our pairing will be. And then after that, I think we have another one in Bruges, I believe.
Yeah, Bruges is in November after Thanksgiving, but
Yeah.
there's definitely going to be the beginners tournament or like,
Ah, yes.
and there might be something. I think there's a Bloodstorm tournament in November as well. So we've
I
got a
believe it's
couple
the
things coming up.
6th. Yeah. Yeah. So we got a lot of good tournaments coming up. So I'll be able to keep critiquing and tweaking. But other than that, yeah. Thanks again to the to Rolf. I think his
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
Rolf.
yeah,
Yeah. Thanks again. Great tournament. Great time.
yeah.
Be
Well,
down again for sure.
I'm planning on going to every one of them that gets announced if I can. So so keep up the good work, and you know, I'm glad to see more of the Dutch scene making their way down there to Belgium. I always think those tournaments are just fantastic. So I personally have a teams tournament coming up this coming weekend. You're going to be going to a buddy's wedding. So and then I'll be in the States for a couple weeks, which is why I can't play doubles with you for our recurring Fire Slayers. I mean, Fire Slayers. I need to get that on my head. Flesh Eater Court's Stormcast storyline that we've got going on. Are you going to play Flesh Eaters with Luke?
I don't know. I told him to come up with his list, and I'll see something that makes fun pairing. Just see what we were thinking about doing, like a full alpha strike. So I might just go full pigs and just see what we could do there.
Right.
So yeah, something like that.
You'll have to come up with a different story. So
Of course.
yeah. All right. Well, as always, thank you to everyone for watching. Let's do all the YouTube things like liking, sharing, and subscribing if you feel so inclined. It helps us reach more people. And thanks again for getting us to 1,000 subscribers recently. Don't forget.
Exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And don't forget to leave some comments. And we're happy in both the Discord and to the video. We're happy to respond there. And thanks again, of course, to having Nick on the channel. So looking forward to the next tournament report, even if it's going to come from me for a bit, and then maybe we can get you and Luke on to talk about the doubles tournament if you feel so inclined.
Oh, sure, yeah. So, love to do it.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks again, and thanks again to everyone for watching. We'll catch you in the next video, and Ryan out.